When I was in high school, during my freshman and sophomore years, I rode my bike to school. It was faster than riding the bus because of the route that the bus would take, and I would be one of the first kids picked up. And obviously, riding my bike was also much faster than walking. It would take me about 10 minutes to get to school on bike, and I would ride along the side of the road. After I got out of my neighborhood, I would ride along the side of a bigger and busier road that was still usually pretty quiet. We lived a little bit away from the city, so traffic was never much of a problem. After I took that larger road for a while, I would only have to turn one more time before I was at the school. I would then park my bike outside on a bike rack and go into the school. I enjoyed it, and there was never any problems, until one day. It was a morning during my sophomore year. I had just put my backpack on and left the house and was now on my bike. I rode out of the driveway and into the street. Soon, I merged onto the larger road. Now, at this time of the year, whenever it was, I remember that it was still completely dark outside. Like I said, the roads were always pretty quiet, but they were especially quiet at this time in the morning. Most of the time, I would only see maybe 3 or 4 cars total on my ride to school. On this day, shortly after going onto the busier road, maybe like 2 or 3 minutes in, a car approached from behind. I would ride on the side space between the road line and the ditch. It was maybe 6 feet wide, so I had a good amount of space. I expected the car to pass, and when it started to, I saw that it was going really slow. The car was a black sedan, and it was relatively small. Beyond that, I didn't know the exact make or model. It's typical for a car passing by to slow down or even drive in the other lane to be safe, so that's what I thought this car was doing. It stayed in the lane near me, but slowed down almost to my exact speed, which was really unusual for a car to go that slow. This is why I really noticed and remembered it. I looked over but couldn't tell who was driving. I didn't recognize the car at all either. Soon though, it eventually passed me, still going really slow. It finally sped up when it was maybe 100 feet in front of me. It was kind of strange and even a tiny bit suspicious, but I was able to make it to school all right. I rode back home just fine as well without noticing the car. But fast forward to the next morning, I saw it again. When I set out that morning, I wasn't thinking about it at all. I got on my bike, rode out of the driveway and onto the street. Then I moved onto the larger road again and rode my bike on the side of it. A couple of minutes into that, at almost the exact same spot as the day before, I heard a car approaching me from behind. I looked behind me and saw just headlights at first. The car then slowed down significantly again. That's when I got the thought back to the previous morning. I thought, what if this is the same car? When the car reached me, I looked over, and sure enough, it appeared to be the same black sedan. I thought that this was really strange. But then I realized that maybe it was just somebody going to his job, and he always left at the same time, like I did for school. But I had never noticed him before until yesterday. I kept riding my bike and minding my own business. The car then got to even speed with me, and then maintained it. We were going parallel to each other. When this continued for an uncomfortable length of time, I looked over at the car. I could see it appeared to be a man driving it, but I couldn't really tell what he looked like. I then started speeding up on my bike, and when I did, the man sped up in his car ever so slightly, just enough to keep up with me. I went faster, and he did the same. Then I slowed down significantly and went back to my first speed. The guy slowed down in his car. I was starting to feel really creeped out. The surrounding area of the road was a lot of woods and a few houses here and there. It didn't make me feel any safer. We were on a long straightaway of the road with no other cars in sight. Finally, the car sped up and moved past me. I was really glad to see this guy finally driving away. He got a long ways up the road, but then I saw his brake lights come on. I got a bad feeling when I saw this. The car then pulled over to the side of the road on the right. I wondered what was going on, and I got really nervous to keep going. After the car stopped, the driver's door opened. A man stepped out, who was very tall and large. He was wearing a black sweatshirt, I remember, and had longer dark hair. I kept riding my bike in his direction. After he had stepped out, he just stood next to his car and faced me. He was looking directly at me as I rode my bike closer, and it was really giving me the creeps. I got within probably 100 feet of the guy. Then I couldn't take it anymore. I suddenly turned around and made a U-turn on my bike. There was no way that I was going to try to get past him. After turning around, I started riding as fast as I possibly could in the direction of my house. My heart sank when I heard the sound of his car door closing behind me in the distance. Then I heard the sound of the car moving. I looked back and saw the car now making a U-turn. There was no way that I was going to be able to outrun the car on my bike. In that moment, I suddenly veered off to the left and into the ditch. I rode my bike into the grass and then hit my brakes and stopped. Then I dropped my bike and got off of it and took off running into the woods. I was desperate and I just needed to get away from this guy. I started running through trees and tall grass, and at first, I could still hear the car approaching me from behind. The farther I got into the woods though, the less I heard of the car. I kept running like crazy until I made it out of that section of the woods. There was an open field of grass and a house in the distance. I ran to the house and when I got there, knocked on the front door. The house was connected to a quiet curving road that likely connected to the busier road that I had been on. This was a neighborhood which had several houses that were all spread very far apart. Nobody answered the door after my first knock, so I knocked again. Still nothing. At that point, I ran around to the back side of the house and hid behind it. I didn't want the man to come looking for me over here. I laid down next to the house and tried my best to be as quiet as I possibly could. I remained there for several minutes. Then, I was going to go back, but I heard a car start driving down the quiet road. I stayed where I was and held my breath. The car, I could tell, was going really slow. It passed by and then seemed to turn around because I heard it again driving back. I never saw the car, but I would bet that it was the man. After I heard it leave, I remained where I was for probably another 5 minutes. Then, I got up and walked back around the house and through the woods back to my bike. It was still there in the ditch. I got on it and then rode back to my house, going as fast as I could the entire time. I didn't see the car on my way back, and I made it home safely. Then I told my mom everything. She called the police, and I was excused from classes and got to stay home from school that day. From that point forward, my mom drove me to school. The following year, I got my driver's license and I could drive myself to school. I will never forget that experience though, and I'm really happy that I got away from that guy. I live out in the country, and I also enjoy bike riding. There are a lot of quiet roads around where I can go. Biking is also probably my favorite form of exercise, and I used to ride on an almost daily basis. One time, I went for a bike ride late at night. It was probably like 9 o'clock, and I hadn't been able to go earlier in the day. Still, I wanted to get some exercise in. The roads were very quiet, so I headed out to ride around the area. To describe the area, there are a lot of woods and some areas of farmland and open fields. I would see this all on my bike rides. I went about a mile down a nearby road and then connected to another one. This road I was going to take for a while and then turn around and head back. It was a route that I had been doing quite a bit at the time. On this night, I got to the final road and maybe 2 minutes into it was passing by thick woods on the left side. The woods lasted for a while, and as I was passing by it, I heard some noise, as if something was moving just inside of it. I looked over and saw some leaves moving lower near some bushes and trees, but I couldn't tell what it was. I figured maybe it was an animal, like a deer. Still, it was a little bit spooky to hear that late at night when it was very dark the way it was. I kept riding and looked back again and still saw nothing. Whatever it was stayed in the wooded area. I moved on from that and kept going. After maybe 5 or 10 more minutes, I turned around and started heading back. Soon, I made it back towards the spot that I had heard the noises in the woods. I didn't know exactly where it was, so I wasn't thinking about it or anything. But suddenly, I heard more sounds coming from up ahead as I was quickly approaching. I saw some movement, and the next thing I knew, a large tree branch came flying into the road, right in my path. When it landed, I was only about 10 feet away from it. As fast as I was going, I couldn't get out of the way. I turned my bike to the right to try and go into the grass and avoid the large log, but I couldn't do it on time. I hit it and was sent flying off my bike as the bike fell to the ground. The good news is that I landed in the grass. It still hurt, but it would have been much worse had I landed on the pavement. I had been able to turn my bike just enough to avoid that. It all happened so fast, I didn't know what was going on at first. After landing, I slowly sat up and gathered myself. For the most part, I was all right. That's when I heard more noises from inside the woods. It was just a little bit behind me. I looked over, and soon a man emerged. He was dirty looking. He had long, blonde, messy hair and a slight beard. The man started walking closer to me. I scrambled up to my feet and ran for my bike. I quickly got on it as the man approached me. He got within maybe 5 feet of me and I started to ride off. Something then flew past my head as I was starting to leave, and I saw that it was a rock. The man had tossed it at me. The man didn't say anything at all the entire time. I didn't know what his problem was. I rode off quickly and was able to make it home safely. I called the police and told them about what had happened. After that, I stopped riding late at night, and I tried to go during daylight hours if possible. I don't know what that guy was doing, but I could have been severely injured by him. I'm grateful that I made it away okay. This happened not too long ago. I live and work in a major city. I have a small apartment and do not own a car yet. My job is also in that same city, and I ride my bike there every day. The city can get busy at times, but riding my bike has never been too big of a problem. There are bike lanes and other people out riding as well, but never too many. So just about a week and a half ago, I rode my bike to work one day. It takes me about 15 minutes to do so, and when I get outside of my work building, I park my bike there. There's a bike rack, and I'm able to lock it there. I had been riding my bike since I moved to the city a little bit over a year ago. After parking my bike just like any other day, I went inside to work. When I left, I returned to my bike to ride home, except I noticed that my bike tires had been slashed. Somebody had clearly and deliberately cut my tires so bad that the bike could not be used. I was really angry when I saw this. I figured that it was just some punk who was trying to cause problems. But there were a few other bikes on the rack as well, and none of them had their tires cut. I had to wait for the bus at the nearest stop and then take that home with my bike. For the next couple of days, I rode the bus to work as I waited for my bike tires to be replaced. After they were replaced, I was able to use it again. And that first day that I rode my bike again, it was fine. But the very next morning, after I got up, I went down to get my bike and leave. Everybody who lives in my apartment building gets their own assigned parking space in the parking garage below the building. In my space, I just keep my bike there until I get a car. When I got to my bike that day, I saw the tires were once again cut. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know who was doing this. I brought my bike up to my apartment and have kept it in there ever since. I've also been taking the bus to and from work every day. Nothing else strange has happened. I really don't know who did that to me, and it's very puzzling. I thought at first that it must be somebody who lived in my apartment building, but I don't know of anybody who would do that. It also could be anybody because it's not all that hard to sneak into the parking garage. If someone else was leaving, the door stays open for like 20 seconds. Still, I don't know of anybody that would do this. At first, I thought it was a random thing, but now I see that it's not. It really creeps me out to think about it. I'm hoping that nothing else like this happens.